just from an economic Republican view, he's a disaster.
He's a disaster, but that's something weird that's happened in the United States over the past 20 years, which is that Democratic administrations, by and large, pick up the pieces, get the budget balanced, and then in comes another Republican administration, and it does all the things the Democrats used to do. Goes into wild spending sprees, runs up the deficit, and then hands it eventually over to another Democratic administration. I mean, Carter got the budget balanced, Reagan broke it, Clinton got the budget balanced, Bush breaks it. What are we up to, 6 or 7% of GDP is a budget deficit?
At times, the United States reminds me of a teenager, that if they make a mess, they just kind of walk away. What if we actually rubbed their noses in the carpet and said, well, as much as it would be nice for you to run away, this time you actually have to stay. If you've gone and made a mess, dear Uncle Sam, isn't it time that you cleaned up the whole mess yourself and got it right?
There's an assumption in there which we must tease out, which is that you can fix it. Your presence is capable of contributing to a solution, and I don't think it is.
Also usually requires a parent standing over saying,
who's the parent,
And we were out of parents.
Yeah, and we're out of parents. I must say, I mean, your comment about the teenagers, a guy in the Japanese Foreign Ministry, we were talking about the Americans' behavior towards China when I was there last year, another project. And a guy in the Japanese Foreign Ministry, I was astonished by this, he said, well, the Americans are like a 12-year-old with a shotgun. Don't quote me on that. He said. And there is an aspect of that. But making them stay to clear up the mess is kind of pointless if it is, in fact, their presence that is contributing most largely to the perpetuation of the mess. And, I mean, you will find British generals saying this quite openly now. I mean, including Mike Jackson, until recently the head of the British Army, saying, look, it is our presence in Basra, in the south of Iraq, that is destabilizing the place. The great majority of the violent incidents are attacks on us. If you get our troops off the streets, the level of violence will drop. If you get us out of the damn country entirely, they will maybe start to put it back together again, because the thugs and the extremists won't have us as a justification for promoting themselves to the front line of politics. It's a perfectly rational argument, and I think it applies to the Americans as well. They are the problem in Iraq, more than anything else.
And Americans are notoriously bad at recognizing themselves wearing a black hat in the mirror. They can't see it.
They can't. No. I mean, it's not that Canadians do very well at that either.
No, but I don't think anybody does.
No, nobody does it well. But there is a first of all, the sheer isolation of the Americans, physically and in media terms, from the rest of the world, is very great. I mean, you don't hear foreign news sources unless you are a member of a very tiny media-happy fringe. You can get them on the 500-channel universe, but Americans don't watch them.
That's the way of watching Fox.
Yeah, I know, they're busy watching Fox, or even if they're watching CNN or whatever, or one of the old channels, NBC or something. They're definitely, you can watch the BBC if you want, you could watch Jazeera if you wanted, but they don't. And they are essentially not in contact with enough foreigners, most of them, to have any idea what foreigners are thinking about the way their country has behaved in a given issue. And then they're inculcated with this kind of millennial nationalism, and there is a millennial aspect to American nationalism. We are the city on the hill, we are the solution to the world's problems, we are the final state of mankind. It makes it very hard to see yourself in black hat. And actually it has this curious double-edged effect, which is that when Americans finally decide they're wrong about something, you quite often get extreme condemnations of the United States, because if we aren't perfect, we're evil. We're evil incarnate. I mean, I remember in the last days of the Vietnam War, and the number of people who would basically condemn the American Republic wholesale for what was in fact a political and strategic blunder by a traditional great power. Stop doing that. pick up the pieces if you can, get on with it. There is still value in this enterprise, the United States, is an appropriate response. But that's not what you got. You got extremism in the other direction. It's ideologically, it's either heaven or it's hell. It is very hard to persuade even quite sophisticated Americans, except if they're in the State Department or something. I know some soldiers who can take it, that the United States is another great power. That's what it is. You know, it's a very great power at the moment, and it probably won't be quite so great relative terms in 50 years' time, but it's a player. And that's all. And whatever the virtues domestically of your political system or otherwise are virtually irrelevant to the strategies you adopt and the success or failures you have in the outside world, in your relations with the external world. It's just not about that. Sorry. Very few Americans can detach that. I mean, it's even in European countries that have been democratic for, well, you know, Britain or France, most of the last 200 years, it is not a requirement that a British war be about democracy. Right? It can just be about, you know,
British objectives,
French interests.
Balkans, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas you can't have an American war that isn't about American values in the minds of Americans. That's very difficult to get past. I don't really think it's going to get, you know, that's what you get with an American war, is that it becomes, in American minds, about
it's a moral crusade.
A moral crusade, ultimate values, the fate of the world, democracy in peril, you know. They'll follow us home if we don't finish the war in Iraq. And I love that image. I see the jihadis straight out of Iraq, still with the sand between their toes, on every overpass in America with RPGs.
The book is The Mess They Made, The Middle East After Iraq. I'm speaking with the author Gwynne Dyer, and The Mess They Made is published by McClelland and Stewart.